Hi everyone, this is Sohara, and I'm here today, Mr. James Close from World Bank, who has a wealth of experience in the field of climate change. James, why don't you introduce yourself a bit?
Yes, delighted to be here, Sohara. I joined the World Bank 4 years ago and had spent most of my career working on finance, a lot of it in energy policy, working on green business and the opportunities that a low-carbon economy could present.
Could you tell us a bit about the World Bank's climate change portfolio and the main areas of focus?
Yes, we've really ramped up our commitments before Lima to 28% of our portfolio by 2020 to be climate co-benefits. So that's a whole series of investments ranging from renewable energy on the mitigation side, energy efficiency, the Montreal Protocol, early eradication of HFCs, and then also on the adaptation side, whether it's coastal zones, whether it's more effective water management, and also many areas that combine all of that. The water, food, energy nexus is a very good example of how adaptation and mitigation come together.
Right. And here at COP22, the World Bank has announced that it's going to ramp up support for the MENA region.
Yes.
Could you elaborate a bit on that?
Yes, yeah, well, this builds on the Africa Climate Business Plan that we developed last year, and many people have heard a lot about the progress that we've made there, financing a lot of projects in Africa, and we want to do the same thing in MENA. We've identified the priorities there, and we think there's an opportunity for us to scale up our ambition on climate action in MENA.
Right. And what are some of the main countries in Africa that World Bank is going to be focusing on going ahead?
Well, we cover all of the countries in Africa, of course. We've got some very good partnerships ranging from the east to the west and the north to the south, and similarly in the Middle East. I mean, the clue's in the name, I guess, that we do cover everything.
Yeah, so this is very pertinent given that today happens to be the sort of Africa Day at COP22. So it's some great news. We'd also like to know a bit about what the World Bank's focus is going to be going ahead with the climate finance portfolio.
Yes, well, we see great opportunity to support our clients. We are a demand-led institution, so we're helping our clients figure out what their needs are for climate finance, and we're working with them to design the kind of programs that are going to enable them to hit their NDC targets, but also to mainstream adaptation and build resilience into their economies.
Right. And speaking of climate finance, there has been a lot of focus here in COP22 about innovative ways of financing climate change projects. What's your view on that?
Yeah, well, I think this is really very exciting, and it ranges from the support that we give to entrepreneurs and innovators. We've got a session later on this afternoon on the climate innovation centers and building a climate business innovation network across Africa. That's the bottom-up type of investment that comes from early stage businesses who can take advantage of this enormous opportunity. And some of the work that we've done to identify the size of the opportunities for the private sector through the IFC report is in the region of 23 billion across 117 countries. So tremendous opportunity for entrepreneurs. Of course, there's other opportunities around as well. Insurance is an extremely important part of the process of building resilience, and we see great opportunities for insurers, and we're working very heavily with them to design insurance schemes that give easy access to insurance for farmers, smallholders, and people who are going to be affected by climate change. So there's a whole wealth of opportunity out there.
Right. There does happen to be some controversy around the issue of insurance as a means of financing climate change interventions. Would you like to maybe debunk some of those myths?
Well, I see insurance really as a way of pricing risk, allocating risk, managing risk, and reducing risk. And that's the way insurance premiums work. The advantage you get in terms of better quality data to make better quality decisions is very important. And then you can work out how to allocate and price risk into the decisions that you make. So do you need a 1 meter extra height on your seawall or a 3 meter height, extra height on the seawall? And that will depend on the data that's available from a lot of the very, very impressive forecasting activity and climate meteorology that's out there.
Right, and speaking about all the different activities that are happening and interventions to fight climate change, there happens to be a lot of effort that's in silos right now. There are a lot of countries, a lot of organizations working, sort of doing their own thing, but there isn't really a centralized mechanism that brings all of them together. I'm just wondering, from the World Bank point of view, is there any thought on that in terms of how we can maybe coordinate the efforts more?
Yes. Well, I think the NDC partnership is going to be a really good vehicle for that.
Yesterday.
Yes. Because that's a real opportunity for countries to learn from one another,
right.
And to work out what the best and most effective climate policies might be. I think the other area that we're working on is with climate ministers, finance ministers and environment ministries, to help them work together to mainstream climate in fiscal policy and budgeting. And that will also drive climate action. And again, we're trying to bring finance ministers together to enable them to see what best practice is, how they can learn from that and deploy that in their own policies.
Absolutely, and speaking of finance ministers and governments, a lot of the governments of developing countries keep sort of hammering on this point that they don't have enough funding themselves to sort of finance all the interventions they need to do, and that's where sort of the role of the private sector becomes so critical. So what advice would you give for developing states specifically to how to engage the private sector more?
Well, I think the first thing is show the opportunity. I mean, that's where the NDC, I think, can demonstrate what a country is going to do in terms of its climate commitments. Then I think second, engage with the private sector. Third, look at opportunities for de-risking. So what kind of support can you get from people like us for guarantees to help you develop the policies that are going to enable investment in low carbon solutions. And then really work with the private sector to bring them in, to be part of it, and increase and expand creditworthiness in the country, both at the national level and at the subnational level.
Absolutely. And, you know, speaking of the national level, I have to bring up a question about my country.
Right.
I happen to be from the Bangladesh, which has a lot of World Bank projects being implemented. Yes. And actually, recently World Bank proposed $2 billion in support to tackle climate change in Bangladesh specifically.
Yes.
But
2 billion, I think.
2 billion, yes, absolutely. And a lot of the questions coming from the government and other NGOs happen to be that, what's the form in which this money is going to be disbursed? Is it loan? Is it grant? And also, what the interest rate would be, and basically on a more sort of broad level, if it is non-grant financing, how is that justified for a country that happens to be one of the most climate vulnerable?
Well, I think we have a package of support for Bangladesh, and some of it is supporting technical assistance support to help build capacity and enable the country to be as sophisticated as it can in implementing some of these policies. But of course we are a bank, our donors give us money and we have a balance sheet, and so our work is really around lending, very often at highly concessional terms, to enable countries like Bangladesh to put in place the investment that's required to deal with climate change.
Right. And also moving from my country to more of a global scale, what do you think we should be thinking of investing in over the next say, 5-10 years to have the highest impact on carbon reduction? Like, what are the low-hanging fruits, so to say?
Well, I would break this down into two things. I mean, one, I think, is the must-dos. Carbon capture and storage, I think, is an important part of that. We've got a long way to go to enable that to be a viable technology. And without it, the IPCC suggests we can't hit the targets that we've set ourselves.
Right.
And then I think there's a whole series of new innovation that we won't know about. I mean, 15 years ago, we didn't know we'd have an iPhone or a smartphone in our pocket. And now, of course, that holds everything that we need in our lives. In 1905, everybody was driving around in horse and carts. By 1915, everybody was driving Model T Fords. So some of those technologies are going to come forward. We don't know what they are. And that's why we need to support investment and entrepreneurship to enable those solutions to be developed.
Absolutely. And moving away slightly even broader, this one issue that keeps coming up is sort of how the change in the U.S. presidency is going to affect the climate negotiations. And given that we are here at COP22, and World Bank is sort of an organization that can actually have significant influence in some of these projects that are going ahead in climate change, how do you think the American presidency might affect maybe the World Bank's interventions and also interventions of other organizations in this sphere?
Well, we don't comment on political issues like that, but what I can say is that we as an institution are committed to dealing with climate change. I think you've seen our presence here, and that we will double down on this issue to make sure that we do everything we can to help the poorest and the most vulnerable, put in place the kind of policies that are going to deliver resilient economies in the future, and at the same time ensure that we stay within our targets that we've set through the Paris Agreement.
That's great to hear. And also, you spoke about resilience, and I want to ask, how is climate resilience being sort of integrated into the World Bank's operational plan, and so to speak, and is climate proofing of investment something you consider?
Well, we screen all of our projects at the moment for IDA, which is our fund for the poorest, for climate resilience and climate risk. And we're going to extend that to all our portfolio across our IBRD lending as well. So that's one of the things that we're doing, but we're also looking at learning from the best practices and applying those in other areas. So what can we do to support our clients who are now having to make decisions under enormous amounts of uncertainty given where we are on the climate change agenda? So what kind of tools and techniques can we do to develop projects that are going to be robust and resilient for many years to come?
Great. I guess my last question to you would be, given that we're here at COP22, what are the main sort of agenda issues you think the negotiators should be focusing on going ahead?
Well, we know that we've done a lot in terms of delivering the Paris Agreement. We know that many countries are ahead on implementing their NDCs, but we also know that we're not doing enough. Yeah. So pace, scale, ambition, and let's enable this climate finance to flow as quickly and effectively as possible.
Great. Thank you so much. If there are any questions from the audience, this would be the time to ask. Yeah? Cool. So that's all. Thank you so much for being with us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Sohara. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.